I guess a fitting title for this is Oops, I Broke My Knife. So just wanted to give a quick idea or instructional video on how we repair a knife with a broken tip. This one came in. I love to see that the knives are getting used, so never think that I'm going to be ticked that you broke a knife that I made. I'm pretty excited that, you know, people use these things and, you know, breakage happens. No matter what kind of steel you use, eventually, you know, people call in and break the tip off. You know, we don't really replace blades. You know, we're small enough that we don't keep a great deal of stuff like this on hand. Occasionally we'll have an extra one, and I don't have an extra one of these MK Ultra blades on hand. But as you can see, gentleman broke about an eighth of an inch off the tip. Pretty hefty break. Tried to repair it, looks like, by grinding the tip down so that he had at least a little bit of a tip. Can't say that I blame him. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a full reprofile on this. I'm going to bring the edge up just a little bit, and then I'm going to profile the back of the spine, and then I'll refinish it and resharpen it. So I wanted to show you the process. Okay, so we are going to take the knife apart since we're going to do a full service package on this knife. So we'll clean it all out and everything. So first thing I got to do is just take it apart. So a couple Allen wrenches is all it really needs. Just undo the pivot. Sometimes they have Loctite on them, but this one did not. Looks like the customer has removed the pivot before. Break these guys loose. A little awkward here with the camera in front of my face, but we'll get this guy taken apart. Give it a wiggle, pull the frame off, and this is what I'm after. So now we're going to go over the grinder and get this guy reprofiled. And as you can see, these knives do get dirty. Yeah, lots of gunk, pocket junk. So, you know, we need to make sure that we get that clean. But we'll fix this first, and then we'll clean it and reassemble it. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here. I've got a old 60 grit belt on the vertical belt sander. I'm just going to rough in the spine of the blade and bring it down a little bit to match the tip, and then I'll real lightly reprofile the tip so that it's not super thick, but at the same time I want to make sure that I can you know, maintain the original shape as best as possible. So I want to rough it in real quick. I'm not overly concerned with keeping the spine perpendicular to the flat right now. I'm just more concerned about roughing it in. Want to make sure I keep it nice and cool. Okay. Now I'm going to run it on the bottom wheel. Now, it's pretty much reprofiled. It'll sink down into the frame a little bit further than it did before, but it's got a tip again. So now I'll go over to a 220 grit belt and clean up the spine, make it look nice. Run it on the horizontal on our trusty Wilmot. We're doing another job here, so I'll pull this work rest off. I'll just freehand grind it. Checking frequently to make sure that I'm keeping it perpendicular to the flat, and I'm not creating a bunch of bobbles and little dents and divots in the spine of the blade. Running the wheel fairly slow. knocking out those 60 grit scratches. And we'll wash it off. Got a nice smooth spine now, if you can see that. I'll clean up back here just a tiny bit more, and then I'll break the edge on the belt. That way it's not sharp. Got it all cleaned up, and then I'm just gonna come in at a 45, break the edge, and voila, we have a reprofiled blade. This light off, that light. Make it so you can see it a little better. Now it's reprofiled. And I'm gonna take it over to the sandblaster, we'll tumble it, and go to reassembly. Okay, so we got the blade all reprofiled. I just spot blasted this, so I'll typically just hold it in the blaster and just blast the spine, and then tumbled it, resharpened it. Now, can't even tell it happened. So now one of the guys in the shop was kindly enough to clean this while I was doing that. So we cleaned all the junk out of it, paying special care to cleaning all the junk out from underneath the lock insert. So from this point, we just want to put her all back together. Let me reach over and grab my grease. I've been using nano grease here lately. Been really liking that. It doesn't bleed out on the anodizing, so it's kind of nice for when we're doing assembly. The nano oil, like a 10 weight or a 30 weight preferably, is gonna give you a little bit faster action, but the grease doesn't bleed out and it lasts a lot longer, so it's kind of a trade-off. I like to put the bearings in folders with the cage down. That way we can put more grease inside with them. And I'm just using a little bit. It doesn't require a great deal. So there's that guy. Then you want to make sure that the pivot is seated properly and in between the 2 points where the pivot will rotate and stop. Then you just put a little bit of grease or oil on your detent track here. Doesn't take much. That was excessive. And I'll typically just kind of wipe it in and wipe it off my finger. Then, a little trick for assembly on all my knives, they all pretty much work the same way. Put the screws through the show side frame, put your standoffs or your backspacer on, and then with your ring finger, your middle finger, or your index finger, you can just pinch it, and that holds it all together. So you can set it down and pick it right back up without much hassle. So we'll throw the other bearing on here. Oops, a little too much grease there. Suck a little of that out. Come on, give me the bearing back. There we go. That was a little excessive on the grease, but kind of got away from me there. Wipe my hands off. And then you just pinch that. I'm mostly paying attention to the pivot when I'm reinstalling this. Just push down on it, put the screw on there, and just ever so gently start threading her together. Now you want to make your pivot tighter than you would actually normally keep it. That will help align everything. And then you'll tighten up your backspacer screws. I just do 2 or 3 turns for the first screw and then tighten up the second screw and then go back and tighten up the other screw. It's just really helpful. It's kind of like the way you do lug nuts on a car. You always alter, you know, do a crisscross pattern. It just helps everything align. Get those nice and snugged up where you want them, and then you can come back and address the tightness of the pivot. And what I'll do is pull the pivot screw back out and apply some Loctite. Let me grab that. I use red, and I just use the stick. Takes a little longer to dry, but it's less messy and it doesn't get into the bearing as easily. You use very little Loctite. It does not require a great deal. Keep that in mind when you're taking your knife apart and putting it together. I typically will like to tighten till it's too tight and then back off a little bit, just until I get some blade play, and then I'll tighten back up until the blade play is gone. And open and close it a couple times just to make sure, and adjust a little bit more. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And now, it's only moderately shorter, has a nice tip. And that, my friends, is how you repair a broken tip. Hope you guys enjoy. God bless.